if we begin to look at how foreign and domestic politics played a part with the events of September 11, 2001, we can get a much more expansive picture, especially post 9/11, the countries that actually benefited from the attacks themselves. And there are three countries that come to mind besides the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. Now, the key to understanding the politics of these foreign nations and how they reflect here in the United States is key, because there is a primary directive that is concentrated on these two governments and how their lobbies work inside the United States. And want to talk about just the fundamental principles of these governments and how they operate, because most people aren't even aware that we have a Gulf lobby or an Arab lobby, which is basically the Saudis, the Gulf area. And also what would help is a general understanding of how certain faiths work, especially for the Arabs and the Muslims themselves, not so much Israel. Their religious sector is basically a sector that doesn't have much in the way of political influence, although they do play a small part in Israel, but not much here in the United States. However, the irony is that the theology is more permeated here than it is over there. And the irony is that we're supposed to be a secular country, but the largest voting bloc inside the United States is the Christian evangelical, the red states. They're the largest Zionist population in the world, even more so than Israel. Israel is a parliamentary democracy with universal suffrage. That means everybody can vote. And they're governed by a 120-member parliament known as the Knesset. It's basically very divisive. And the government structure works, the political structure works as the prime minister, which is the executive branch. The government is the executive branch. The president, who is the state figurehead. And of course, we have the Knesset, which is the legislative branch. And of course, the people, the electorate. It's a lot more simpler when you look at it, as opposed to like other countries' governments, how they're complex. With Israel, it's basically quite simple. There's a couple of parties here. I think there are more parties in Israel than there are in the United States, but they don't have much in the way of power. So I'm just going to name a couple of the political parties. And number one is the Likud Party. And as of right now, they hold 30 seats out of 120 in the Knesset. The Likud Party is the most fanatic of them, besides maybe the Shahs, who are the Orthodox, but they don't have much in the way of seats. They only have 6 or 7 seats. The Likud Party is a nationalist party, much in the way of like the evangelicals are in the United States. They're led by, of course, its prime minister. He's been prime minister twice, first time in 1996, and of course in 2004 he was elected. I could be wrong about the year. Don't hold me to it, but you could look it up and correct me if I'm wrong. He is the head of the Likud Party. He's come under some fire as of late, even from his own party, due to a couple of charges that he's being pressed with. I think it's corruption, basically. But Netanyahu is primarily one of the most powerful people in the world, actually, for such a small country. The Zionist organization, which is led by its party's directives in other countries, not so much in Israel. Incredulously, inside the United States, we have approximately over 110 million evangelicals. And these people believe, and this is what we're talking about, the theology that's aligned with the politics. The Christian evangelicals believe that the final war is, according to the New Testament, that the biblical Megiddo, which is a city in Israel where the Battle of Megiddo happens, and Christ returns. All the country's wars stop at this place, and Christ returns and kills all the Jews who don't convert to Christianity. Whereas Orthodox Judaism, they don't have a belief in Jesus Christ. With them, the third temple is built and the Mashiach returns, and I think Jews get, according to their theology, I want to get this right, close to it, I think they get like 500 Gentiles as slaves forever. Monotheism, all in a nutshell. However, they do play a part in politics, and especially here in the United States, where you have approximately 110 million evangelicals who are willing to make this happen. This is where the dangerous part comes from, even if it's through the Samson option, and that's with Israel. Whereas if Israel loses the country, this is the reason why they have so many nukes. And in the book, The Samson Option, I forgot the name of the author, but at the end it states that Israel would just end the world. That's why they have so many nukes. And nobody knows how many nukes they have, but they have, according to Mordecai Vanunu, who was imprisoned, he came out as a whistleblower. And Israel is the only country where they don't have the International Atomic Agency do a check on how many nukes these people have. This country has. Nobody is allowed to. No foreign country, anyway, is allowed to do any. I forgot the word. Momentary lapse of reason. There's no check on this country and how much nuclear weaponry they have. However, going back to their Knesset, the Likud Party holds the most seats with the Zionist Union. Now, the Zionist Union has the second most seats, and they're the direct threat to the Likud Party. They're center left when it comes to politics. They're basically a joint electoral group created in 2014. And they're basically the only party that could really threaten the Likud Party as of right now. You do have the Joint List. The Joint List is a political alliance of Arab politics, which there were numerous Arab parties. They all joined into one, and that's why they're called the Joint List. They hold 13 seats. The Yesh Atid, which is a centrist political party in Israel, founded in 2012. They primarily concentrate on civics, socioeconomic of Israel. Basically, they are only 11 seats. They basically don't have much in the way of power in regards to politics. And then you have others like the Jewish the Jewish Home, the Shahs, who are ultra Orthodox, and the Greens. These are all parties that have like 5 or 6 seats and don't have much in the way of power. However, the ideology of Zionism, which is backed by the Likud party, is the driving force of why we see so much in the way of disturbing trends inside the country in regards to Palestinians. And also, it's the driving force here in the United States, unfortunately, because this property of nationalism, this ideology of nationalism, which is permeated into our politics, our military. If you take a look at the politics within even just our religious sector, primarily nationalist, evangelical Christianity is the driving force here in the United States. Church is led by people like John Hagee, who espouses Israeli nationalism in his sermons every day, just about. Kenneth Copeland, Joel Osteen, Benny Hinn, Creflo Dollar. I could go on and on and on. I mean, these people are millionaires, all these people, and they drive millions of people to their churches. They're not even churches, they're mega churches. And these people live in 10-bedroom houses, fly private jets and fancy cars. Meanwhile, their constituents are basically front rows with their large, extreme, extravagant hats and well-dressed. Meanwhile, the rest of the poor, lesser constituents can sit in the back row, watch on TV, and feel gratefully in donating 10% of their paycheck with a tithe to these greedy dispensationalists. And these aren't Christians by any means. Christ was a liberal as depicted in the Bible. These people aren't liberal at all. Their politics are basically pro-Israel. Most of the megachurches are anti-Islamic. And I'm going to get to their politics in a minute. Israeli politics are led by, of course, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or in short, AIPAC. And they are the most powerful foreign lobby in the United States. They don't have much in the way of finances. That's for the Gulf lobby. They're the most affluent in terms of finances. And they come in, and they're the oldest lobby. Israel lobby is not very old. The ideology of Zionism has permeated inside the United States since the late 19th century. At first, it wasn't very strong, considering that a lot of the European Zionists or European Jews had just moved out of Russia during the pogroms. They had to leave. And of course, they permeated certain Arab countries. I think to this point, Iran has the most populace of Jews in any Arab country. I think second would be, I want to say it's Lebanon or Jordan, one of those countries. And so we have this ideology of Zionism that is permeated in our politics, and it grew in the 20th century with certain Christian Zionists backing in the early periods, like William Eugene Blackstone, an infamous Christian Zionist. And we have plenty of Christian nationalists in this country, going back as the early 17th century. So that in itself even predates Israeli Zionism itself. So we can't just blame Israel saying the whole country is corrupt. They do inhumane things, not to just the Palestinians. Israel itself is very complex in regards to their population. They're led by, of course, the Likud party. They're led by their religious sector. Even though they're a small populace, they hold some power in regards to society, not so much in politics. And of course, a large part of Israel are secular. They don't believe in God. Incidentally, all three of these people do want an Israeli-only state, even though the religious sector, the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi Jews, are willing to share the land with Arabs, where the Zionists do not care to share the land with Arabs, and the secularists are basically divided upon that. And so there's this like conflict within the three, but they all three have a basic understanding that Israel must be an Israeli-only state led by Israeli law. In regards to the formation of Zionism here in the States, you have multiple influential figures in the early period of the 19th and 20th century, most notably Louis Brandeis. And of course, in the 1950s, we see the formation of AIPAC, led by Isaiah Kennan. And this is during the Eisenhower administration. And it took a while, a couple of years, for it to grow. At first, the United States was very leery of a foreign entity and a foreign agency having a sway in American politics. In fact, in the very early periods of AIPAC, I think it was the FBI that wanted to label them as a foreign agency. They're not labeled that now. And so we have basically the United States led by its evangelical sector, evangelical Christians, who are 100% unwavering loyalty to a foreign agency like AIPAC, because Israel is a key part into their theology. That's where you hear like politics, like you hear like Bush or Trump or any other Democrat like Nancy Pelosi will show unwavering support for Israel because they're the key to the relationship. Well, of course, if they're Christians or if they're evangelicals or whatever you want to label them in terms of their brand of monotheism, brand of Christianity, the unwavering support and loyalty is only because that they need the return of Christ. And that only comes in Israel. And of course, with Israeli politics, it's led by its nationalist point of view, the Likud party, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been the only person outside the president who has spoken the most times inside the House. Or no one else has spoken more. Now let's go to the Arab lobby, the Saudi lobby, the Gulf lobby. They're the oldest of the two. They don't have like a conference like AIPAC. The Saudi lobby are like professional lobbyists, professional like lawyers, corporate shareholders, CEOs of companies. And this is more the financially strengthened of the two. They're more financially influential in regards to our politics. And that's all they can offer. But they offer in the billions of dollars. AIPAC doesn't offer that much money at all. And because they're not financially affluent as like the Saudis. And the reason why is because the Saudis are led by their petrodollar. But let's talk about how their government is run, which is very simple. They're led by an absolute monarchy, and they're led by the Quran and the Sunnah, which is the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, two different books. And of course, they're governed by Sharia law, Islamic law. Unwavering, no compromise whatsoever. You may hear people in the media say, oh, Saudi Arabia is going through reforms, or Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, is a reformist. King Saud, Salman Al Saud, or King Fahd, any of the kings, oh, these are reformists. No, they're not, actually. They may give the illusion that they're reformists, like as of late, I think Crown Prince Salman actually gave the right for women to drive a car. However, women cannot walk around without a male companion. So when I say that they're not reformists, they really aren't. And so they try to appease their public point of view in regards to foreign press, because Saudi Arabia comes under a lot of criticism from foreign press. Not so much in regards to Israel. Israel gets no criticism from foreign press here in the United States at all, or in Great Britain, or in Canada, or any country that is primarily led by the Zionist lobbies. Now, just to go back to Israel also, too, AIPAC isn't the only lobby inside the United States. There are many other lobbies, Christians United for Israel, Zionist Organization for America, but they're not as big. But there are dozens of these lobbies that are influential in trying to gauge public opinion regarding Israel, and they go to like universities, corporations like Walmart, Target. Believe it or not, they have a lot of power, wield a lot of power. Saudis itself, their power, like I said, comes from the petrodollar, and it comes from the United States having a direct pipeline into their oil reserves. The first company to enter the United States was Standard Oil, which is ExxonMobil, and they have their own company, Aramco. The monarchy and the royal family are the Sudari Seven. Now, what are the Sudari Seven? Well, the Sudari Seven are the seven lineage of their first king, King Saud, right? Al Saud. He's the founder of modern-day Saudi Arabia. Before that, the country was basically called the Emirate of Diriyah. So, when the Saudis captured lands like Najiz and Hijaz, and they basically captured 4 major cities, and that's how Saudi Arabia was created. And it was united as one. They weren't as divided, even though you have tribal factions inside Saudi Arabia that do play a liberal part or a lenient part in politics. There is no vote. There is no vote. It's only voting by the tribal factions, and of course, the hundreds, even thousands of descendants of these 7 lines, these 7 lineage of Saudi Arabia. And of course, this is a very detrimental monarchy. Now, interestingly enough, their brand of theology is Sunni Islam. However, the country was created in part by Muhammad ibn Abdul al-Wahhab, who, along with King Saud, created the foundations of Saudi Arabia, where Wahhab was influential in creating the religious sector. The country would be ruled by his brand of theology, which is Wahhabism. King Saud would be, of course, its military might or its political might. So the country itself is led by 2 distinct areas. One, its theological branch, Wahhabism, and the political branch, which is the Sudari Seven, the 7 sons of Al Saud. And so with Wahhabi Islam, it has basically been spread throughout most of the Gulf and Southeast Asia. And it became influential here in the States, I'd say, during the 1960s, when the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which purports billions of dollars by pumping into these madrasas here and abroad, by spreading this ideology all throughout the world. And that's why we have many of these terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda, which are basically maybe I think there's 300 left in their ranks. Islamic State, As-Sahab, Boko Haram, Abu Sayyaf in the Philippines, Jaish Muhammad in Pakistan, and so on. You have many other smaller organizations, maybe like al-Nusra in Syria, which go by, I think, Dar al-Sham. They always change their names so that the public don't record their atrocities in these countries. And you have literally hundreds of these groups, small groups. Basically, a lot of these groups are disorganized, and they're in poverty-stricken neighborhoods where they take advantage of by spreading the ideologies. And that's how it grew, excuse me, in countries like Egypt, Iraq, Afghanistan. Taliban will qualify. And a lot of these countries owe it to Saudi Arabia, who spend literally in the tens of billions annually. And according to certain crown princes, certain princes inside Saudi Arabia, the reason why they do this is so that they can appease these terrorist organizations, especially in the 1980s, where they gave millions of dollars to Al-Qaeda and Abu Sayyaf. And the reason why is so that they don't turn their direction towards Saudi Arabia. And the reason why, we say, why would they attack the hand that feeds them? Well, because in 1990, Saudi Arabia made a mistake, so to speak. They invited the United States military to defend its country from Saddam Hussein in Iraq and the Baathists, which are a secular ideology in the military, the Baathists themselves. And Saudi Arabia doesn't have much in the way of a military. Israel has a military that's supported by us, even though we're the military for Israel. We're also the military for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia itself is not a country which is military oriented. They do have an army. It's basically not much in the way of a threat besides the Yemen public, even though when it comes to the Yemen conflict, the United States and Egypt are basically the primary financial benefactors to Saudi Arabia. Most of the missiles, weapons, tanks, even small arms and large arms fire comes from us. And so basically with this theology that is a threat even to Saudi Arabia itself, it's basically kept the United States and the globe, the rest of the world, in a constant state of conflict because these groups and these ideologies have one thing in common, that is to make the entire world Islamic when it comes to Wahhabi. And of course, you have Sunni theologians that consider Wahhabi Islam heretical. They're not at all Islamic. In fact, Wahhabists are now the more fervent ones, even the more ultra-Orthodox in Al-Qaeda, like the Islamic State. They kill Alawites, Shiites. In Islam, there are basically two parties. You have Sunnis and Shias, and Sunnis make up, I think it's 88% of the population of Arabs around the world in terms of their brand of theology. And with Iran being the largest in regards to, it's the main Shia country in the world, left now anyway. So the politics of Saudi Arabia inside the United States has been influential as going back to the Wilson administration as early as the 1930s and 40s, where it really took hold in the 60s. After the Six-Day War, where Israel defeated Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, Saudi Arabia, basically to show you how powerful it is, regulated their own oil and created an oil shortage, where oil prices here in the United States, and oil is considered the black gold here in the United States, suffered immensely in the 1970s and 80s. And so the United States relented in regards to how they saw Israel in politics. But that was short-lived. Of course, in the 1980s and 90s, we see the United States and Israel their bond really strengthening, and that comes from basically the populace of the evangelicals here in the States and the growth of megachurches and their influence in politics. Yet they don't get taxed in the way of like other corporations in regards to politics themselves. And that shows you how much power the evangelical base has here in the United States. Huge base. I mean, really powerful people. Not so much with the Saudis. The Saudis and Arabs are always going to be seen in the public view as questionable, morally reprehensible, I guess. With people I talk to on a daily basis, they don't consider Muslims. I mean, of course, 9/11 was the catalyst for this. Before that, Muslims were people that you scratch your head and look at. But of course, this is detrimental to the Arab community as well, because they basically condemned the actions of Saudi Arabia, 9/11, Al-Qaeda, and all these fanatics who are used by the intelligence apparatuses of not just the United States, but also in Pakistan, Israel, Great Britain, Jordan, Egypt, Syria, you name it. Any intelligence apparatus can infiltrate these groups and manipulate them and use them for a greater geopolitical agenda. So that's what 9/11 really is. And it's often forgotten that, these countries and their politics in regards to the events of September 11, 2001, and how that does play a part. I mean, if you want to say that why these two countries benefited to a certain extent of what happened after 9/11, not so much during 9/11. The United States lost 3,000 of its citizens, but we ended up killing 1.2 million in Iraq. So look, and that was based on a lie. And I'm not going to get into that about the anthrax scandal, how the neoconservative party forced the National Security Council to try and find evidence of Iraq and 9/11. They couldn't do it, so they went with weapons of mass destruction. They went with false testimonies of certain people that were kept in Guantanamo. Iraq war was based on a lie. Everybody knew it except for the politics. I mean, everybody knew it, including the politics, the political hierarchy. And so if we're willing to kill 1.2 million, what's 3,000 people here in the States? If you don't think the United States would kill people to achieve multiple goals, you're living in denial. So and then that comes with the question, did certain agencies or people knew about the attacks that were going to happen? Well, of course. CIA definitely knew. This is speculation, but I'm going to say that the NSA knew because they bugged the houses that were affiliated with Al-Qaeda. They bugged Bin Laden's satellite phone, and for years. And, I've said in a previous interview that they were definitely talking about these attacks. It's well known that they were going to use planes as weapons, even going back as far back as 1995 with Bajinka plot. Okay, so, but I don't want to delve down into this road, but I wanted to bring up this video and talk about how foreign politics have an influence here in the United States and vice versa, especially with Saudi Arabia and Israel in the United States, because this is something that's hardly ever talked about in the area of September 11, 2001. And it's an important area.